desperate to spare Mamma from worry, though full of doubt over how the promise might be fulfilled. But after Mamma left the world, a strange thought slid into Lizzie's head. Was it possible that the death of a kind, gracious wife like Mamma could work a change in Edward Maudsley and make him actually crave his daughter's companionship? After all, Lizzie had reached the age of 12, and that was surely old enough to provide both comfort and conversation, if he just took the trouble to know her. A feeling like hunger stirred in the hollow space of her stomach, though it wasn't a yearning for food. Hope stirred too. But the day after Mamma's funeral brought unexpected developments. Lizzie didn't know where her father was going when he left the house in the carriage, but seized the chance to slip out to say a private goodbye at Mamma's graveside, intending to slip back in with no harm done. Not wanting to be seen walking out between the front gateposts, she pushed through the hedgerow at the side of the garden into Amesbury Lane and made her way to the churchyard from there, kneeling beside the sorry heap of brown earth and sobbing with grief for the woman who'd meant the world to her. Shy, tender-hearted Mamma hadn't enjoyed the society of Witherton's starched and critical matrons, and she'd educated Lizzie at home, so they'd spent most of every day together. How was Lizzie to bear life without her? Loneliness stabbed at Lizzie's heart as tears stung her eyes like red-hot needles. But she had to bear it. Somehow. In time, she got up and wiped her eyes on a handkerchief, promising Mamma all over again to do her best to get along with Papa. She was pushing back through the hedgerow from Amesbury Lane when he returned in the carriage. Ducking behind a laurel bush, she watched in surprise as he helped a woman down onto the gravel drive. She was a tall, thin, handsome woman, but her lips were narrow and her eyes were sharp. And oddly, she looked up at Briar Lodge with a triumphant expression, almost as though she were thinking, "I'm here at last, and it's mine now, all mine." Unease seeped into Lizzie's skin like icy water. Who on earth was this woman? The gardener came to take the carriage away, and Betty the maid opened the front door to Papa and his visitor. Lizzie waited a few minutes longer, then made her way to the rear door that led into the passage between kitchen and scullery. From here, she could take the back stairs to her room. Or she could have done, if Betty hadn't caught her. "Heavens, miss, I was just going to fetch you." Betty looked flustered. "Has the visitor upset you, Betty? Who is she?" "Her name's Miss Monk. That's all I know, but you're wanted in the drawing-room. Hurry along, but go up to the landing and come down the front stairs like you're supposed to. I'm to fetch tea." Lizzie started up the stairs. "Miss, your boots!" Betty wailed. "Your dress, too!" Amesbury Lane had been muddy. After a quick and not very thorough clean-up, Lizzie descended the main stairs with neat steps, as befitted a young lady brought up by Mamma who had once been Miss Grace Sophia Kellaway of Harrogate. The drawing-room door stood open, showing Miss Monk sitting stiff-backed in a chair and looking around the room as though taking an inventory. "That ormolu clock is mine now. So is that magnificent mirror. Those silver candlesticks, the china, mine, mine, mine." She was a little older than Mamma, with none of Mamma's angelic softness. This face had a hard, greedy look to its handsomeness. Lizzie took a deep breath and knocked on the door. "Enter," Papa called, turning from the window. Lizzie walked in. "This is my cousin, Miss Monk. Susan, this is Elizabeth," he said, but he barely glanced at Lizzie. She was disappointed, worried too, and more than a little confused because she'd never heard mention of a cousin. She'd always understood the family comprised just Papa, Mamma, and herself. But she set these uncertainties aside temporarily, stepping forward to execute a small curtsy before holding out her hand and saying, "It's a pleasure to meet you." Susan Monk looked unimpressed. She left Lizzie's hand floating in the air and raked her up and down with